HaOmer, the week of Yesod. And if there was one video that was intimidating the hell out of me when I looked forward in doing this entire series, it was this one. Because when I look back on my own personal journey, and I think about all these Sfirot and all the learning I've done around them, and all the growth I've done through them, the one that really stands out as being the most growthful, the one I really was able to integrate into my life was Tiferet. We talked about that back in week 3. But when I look forward on my journey, all the things I need to learn, all the things I need to master, all that growth I have yet to do, the one that stands like a mountain in front of me is this one, is Yesod. And so I really started thinking about, what am I going to do when I get up to the week of Yesod? And I had an experience recently that really made a huge impression on me, that it's not just me. Sometimes our struggles, we feel they're so individual, they're so unique to us. But I was in a room of 5,000 people, and it became clear at that moment that so many of us, the number one area that everybody was struggling with, or the majority of the people were struggling with, was this one, was Yesod. And I'll tell that story in a bit, but first I want to talk a bit about what exactly is Yesod. So Yesod is associated with the character of Joseph. And just like we talked about with Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet, whereas Tiferet was in the middle, didn't have the flaws of the other two, so too we have that same pattern with Netzach and Hod and Yesod. Yesod is in the middle, and it doesn't have flaws. You can have too much Netzach, too much force to break through things, too much Hod, too much passive, splendor. But Yesod is something that is in the middle. It's an area that does represent an aspect of perfection, that we really don't have any flaws in it whatsoever. On the body, it sits in the place of the sexual organs. And that's really representative of the fact that so much about Yesod is about sexuality, it's about relationship, it's about contact. It also deals with other areas such as money and speech. And all of these areas are boiled into Yesod. And Joseph, the character, you could see that he struggles with a lot of these areas. One of the things I love about the story of Joseph is it's not this story of the stagnant individual. Sometimes there's a tendency to read about the stories of our forefathers, and especially some of the books made for kids. It makes them out to be people who are perfect from the beginning. And whenever I read about a story about a person who's perfect, I'm like, I've got nothing to learn from this person because they don't struggle. So how am I able to learn from their overcoming struggles? Because I'm a struggler. The story of Joseph, he struggles. His life is not easy at all. And you see that his relationships early on suck. They're horrible. So much so that his brothers sell him. They're so desirous to get rid of this kid that they sell him into slavery. And even when he's in slavery, he lords himself over others. He's so into his greatness. He's so into, even says to Potiphar's wife, look, I control everything. Your husband puts total faith in me. And he's so into his power, his greatness, everything. And if you ever ask the question, why did Joseph need to struggle for so many years? Why did he need to be a slave? And he needed to be in prison, and he had to go through so many horrible things. And I think a big part of the reason is because what happens if you take a guy who feels that he's been completely wronged, like Joseph felt when his brothers had sold him, and you put him now into a position of power, where now he's got the power of life and death over these very brothers of his. And had they come before him at this point, had he immediately ascended to the rank of king, and his brothers came before him, he probably would have sought out revenge. And he could have killed his brothers for what they did to him. He needed to go through so many struggles to perfect himself in these areas of relationship. And to see that this is all part of a bigger plan. Like he says, the brothers are bowing down to him, and they're saying, we're willing to be your slaves. And he says, look, this is all God's doing. This is all something much bigger. And you can see that he's done tremendous work on himself, and he's perfected himself. And only then is he able to really build into these really deep, meaningful relationships. So what's the story that I alluded to earlier? So we were in Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny in Florida a few months back. I've alluded to it in some prior discussions. But we had this one really powerful activity. We were each given a note card. And we were told to write on this note card the most embarrassing thing you could think about. Something could be a secret that you've never told anybody because it is so horrendous, so awful that you could never get yourself to voice it. And you're going to write it on this note card, but you're not going to sign your name. And nobody's going to associate what this is with you, so it's not going to come back to you, but write it down. And we all wrote on our note cards our most horrendous, horrible things that we could think about in our lives. And then they were all collected. And they were brought up, and Sage Robbins, Tony's wife, sat on stage, and she pulled these cards out at random from this group of 5,000 people and just started reading them out loud. With 5,000, we did this with 5 people. Everyone would be looking around and saying, "Ooh, whose was that? Whose was that?" But with 5,000 people, there was total anonymity. So people were free to write whatever they wanted to be writing. And the vast majority of people, when we read their note cards, they were dealing with issues of relationship, with sexuality, to a lesser degree with finances, but really sexuality was the number one area that people were embarrassed about. And so much of it comes from this place of not feeling free, like this is something I could even be talking about. That this is an area where I'm supposed to be competent. All the movies have images of people who are these great jocks, these very sexually attractive people. There's this whole idea of someone being very desirable sexually, and this is a big part of their ego, and the way people define themselves is through their sexuality. And then, for me, I think back, I was this teenager and feeling very overwhelmed in this area, and very much feeling like I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know the way I'm supposed to be acting. I don't know the way I'm supposed to be getting across. But I knew was very, very, very important. Kids were talking about this area all the time. We were obsessed about this area. But they're always also talking about how competent they were and how great they were and bragging about themselves. And it's like, as me, as kind of a lost teenager, I felt very, kind of ashamed in this area. And, well, who am I supposed to be? Well, how am I supposed to be competent in this area? How am I supposed to be acting? Where people make fun of me if I don't know exactly the way to act and the way to react in this area of relationships and in sexuality. And I felt very lost in that area. And, truthfully, that carried over for many years for me. And partially because I felt like it was an area that was not okay to be talking about. That it felt strange. It's an area that seemed wrong to be asking for advice in, to be seeking out help from others in. And when I started learning about Yesod, started learning about it, it was fascinating to me that sexuality was put together with money, both in the area of Yesod. And they didn't strike me as very similar, but that was also an area that it seemed like, well, you don't want to be talking about too much. I was always brought up to be like, you don't ask people about how much they make. You don't want to be talking about money. It's this thing that, it's very kind of beneath the sheets type subject, just like sexuality. It's one of these things we don't come forward with. And I often had a lot of money struggles as well because there were things I didn't know, and I was kind of unable to admit my own weakness and know where to go to find better advice, to find people who could help me in these areas. In fact, something that Han and I have started doing recently is sitting down with young married couples and talking to them about money, trying to open up dialogues of discussion, open up the discussion between them, and raise concepts that we hadn't known, but that would have been incredibly helpful to us if we had known them when we first got married. In fact, we're working on a book right now, the follow-up to the Size of Your Dreams book, and it's a book about money. It teaches about financial independence and financial literacy, but it does so in a romance novel. And it immediately strikes people as strange that we're talking about money in a romance novel, or that's how we're giving away all these lessons about money. But there's a certain connection between these two ideas. And they're both in this area of Yesod, and Yesod is just an area where people struggle. I used to think that so many of my struggles were mine. And the more I talk to people, the more I'd say that 85% of people, if I had to put a number on it, if you ask about all these different spheres, all these different areas where people are struggling, would probably put their struggles in this area of Yesod. So this is the area where I feel like I've actually had the most growth in recent years, but the most growth I still need to do in further years. And we're going to be talking a bit about Yesod, how we can go further in Yesod during this week. But this is really where we're hitting the tip of the iceberg on this one. Like, I feel like I felt so intimidated even making this video, because I'd ask myself, who am I to be talking about Yesod? Who am I to be standing here and saying, I understand Yesod. Isn't this my area of struggle? Why should I be talking about this, the area that I most need to grow in during this week? And I think part of it is giving ourselves permission to say, you know what? Yes, I struggle in this area. And yes, I'm going to step forward and talking about it. Because remember, speech is also in the area of Yesod. So taking all of these hidden, secret ideas, things we don't talk about, and finding safe places where we can talk about them, where we can grow from them, where we can really excel in them, that's so much of what we're trying to do this week in Yesod. Yesod is also, by the way, foundation. We set ourselves a bedrock foundation in these areas, and we can build so many amazing things out of there. So I'm really looking forward to going through this entire journey with you on this week of Yesod. It intimidates me. If you're at all like me, I'm sure it intimidates you too, but I think we have the most to gain from this entire period this week in the week of Yesod.